The iron bars rattled as a German shepherd shifted, the hollow clang echoing through the abandoned barn. Dust motes danced in the feeble sunlight that crept to the broken roof, falling like shards of time. For years, he had lived in that cage, silent but watching, eyes sharp, body coiled with restrained power. Outside, the small town of Cedar Hollow thrived in ignorant bliss, unaware of the secrets buried behind decaying wood and rusted hinges. But now, the wind carried a scent of fear, of smoke, of something that would force the world to notice him, and the terrible, hidden talent he had honed in silence. Before we move to Chapter 1, I'll naturally weave in a subtle, human feeling call to like and subscribe as requested, without breaking immersion. The morning fog clung stubbornly to Cedar Hollow, weaving through the skeletal trees like ghostly fingers. A distant rooster crowed, fractured and uneven, as if reluctant to mark the start of the day. Beyond the town's tidy streets, past the peeling paint of shuttered houses, the barn waited. Its wood was splintered, doors warped, the lock rusted into oblivion. But inside, a darkness had been shaping a singular presence for years. The German shepherd pressed against the bars of his cage. His paws were callous, his coat dull from neglect, but his amber eyes glimmered with strange, unsettling intelligence. Every sound in the barn, a creaking beam, a distant crow, a shifting floorboard, was catalogued in his mind. Time here had taught him patience, calculation, and observation in ways no ordinary dog could endure. "Charlie," a voice rasped in the shadows. Thomas Reed emerged, thin, hunched, a cigarette smoldering between fingers stained yellow from nicotine. He paused mid-step, exhaling smoke like a specter. "You've been watching for too long, haven't you?" The dog tilted his head slightly, unafraid. Years of isolation had stripped him of instinctive fear. Instead, he had learned something more precise, judgment. Thomas's hand hovered near the cage. His eyes darted to the padlock, a mechanism he'd grown careless with over the months. "Maybe one day," he muttered, "you'll do more than just stare." The words were almost affectionate, but there was a hardness beneath them that hinted at fear. Outside, the first cars rattled along Main Street. Children's laughter drifted faintly on the wind, blissfully ignorant of what lay in the barn behind cracked walls. The shepherd's ears twitched. Every human sound was catalogued, noted, and stored in a mind sharpened by isolation. The door creaked again, and this time another figure entered, a woman, her boots leaving prints on the dusty floor. Clara, Thomas's estranged sister, carried a basket of supplies. Her eyes, a cold blue, didn't soften when she looked at the dog. There was tension here, a history of whispered betrayals and grudging cooperation. "You still keep him locked up?" she asked, voice flat. There was no accusation, only a measured distaste that simmered beneath the surface. Thomas shrugged. "He's special. Can't risk letting him out." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Special? You mean dangerous?" The dog barked once, low and measured, not in anger but as if in acknowledgement. It was a sound that carried weight, almost human in its intent. "You know," Thomas said, leaning against the support beam, "I've thought about it, about letting him out, maybe for good this time." His eyes flicked to Clara, searching for a reaction. She didn't give one. In the town below, the market began to stir. A few miles away, Sheriff Harlan made his rounds, unaware that the Reed barn, once a minor curiosity in local gossip, was about to pull him into a nightmare. For the dog, time had been both punishment and teacher. Every day he had endured hunger, confinement, and neglect, but had honed his senses, sharpened his reflexes, and awakened an intuition so precise it bordered on preternatural. He could hear the town's secrets in the way the wind shifted through the trees. He could smell fear, hope, lies, and truth, all mingled in the faintest hint of human scent. Thomas moved closer, resting a trembling hand on the dog's head. The shepherd leaned into the touch, not with affection but with calculated trust. He had learned which humans were predictable, which were dangerous, and which could be manipulated. "You remember the first time, don't you?" Thomas murmured. His gaze fell to floorboards, worn smooth by decades of neglect and dust. "I swore we'd keep you safe, even if the world hated you." The dog's ears flicked. "Safe. That word had a different meaning here. It was survival under constraint, learning to endure what humans call cruelty. Clara shifted, her hands tightening around the basket. "And now?" she asked. Her tone suggested that the answer frightened her even before it was spoken. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the dog, the years of isolation, of silence, of training pressed into the lines of his face. "Now," he said finally, "I think it's time the world remembered what he can do." The German shepherd's gaze followed him, unwavering, almost imperious. Time had given him patience, but it had also given him purpose. Every sound of movement, every distant echo from the town, every human heartbeat, the dog cataloged them all. The cage had been a prison, yes, but it had been a crucible, refining instincts into a weapon that Thomas had barely begun to understand. A sudden noise outside made all three human presences tense. The door flung open with a gust of wind, rattling the cage and throwing shadows across the barn's dust-strewn floor. The dog growled, low and dangerous, a sound that vibrated through the air like a warning. Thomas moved in front of Clara, instinctively. "Who's there?" he barked, voice tight with irritation and fear. The fog outside shifted, forming shadows that seemed almost sentient. The shepherd's hackles rose, muscles coiling beneath his matted fur. Ready, a figure emerged. Sheriff Harlan, squinting, his hand resting on the grip of his revolver. "Evening reads," he said, trying to mask his unease with forced cheer. "Heard some noises. Thought I'd check." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You didn't hear any noises in town, did you?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her tone. "No," the sheriff admitted, voice low. "But something about this place, you can feel it, can't you? Something's off." The dog growled again, sharper this time, baring teeth in a controlled display of power. Thomas's hand moved like lightning, covering the animal's snout, steadying it. "He's harmless," Thomas said, more to himself than anyone else. "Mostly." Sheriff Harlan's gaze flicked to the dog, lingering on the amber eyes that seemed to pierce into his very thoughts. "Mostly," he repeated, uneasy. Thomas's smile was tight, almost bitter. "Patience," he said. "You'll see." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the barn as if whispering secrets no human ear could understand. The dog's eyes followed it, alert, calculating, knowing. There was a storm coming, one that would test the bonds of trust, loyalty, and fear that had been carefully maintained in this remote corner of Cedar Hollow. Clara's gaze shifted from the dog to Thomas, then back. "We can't keep hiding him forever," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "And yet we have," Thomas replied, voice steady. "Because some talents, some truths, they can't be revealed until the world forces your hand." The dog barked, a sharp, commanding sound that seemed to resonate with purpose. It was a call to action, a signal that the years in the cage had not dulled him. They had forged him. The barn fell silent again, save for the creak of the roof, the distant calls of birds, and the faint whisper of the wind. But in that silence lay a tense promise. When the storm hit, when the secrets of the Reed barn were finally forced into the open, the German shepherd would be ready, and Cedar Hollow would never be the same. Night draped Cedar Hollow in a velvet darkness, the kind that made even familiar streets seem unfamiliar, dangerous. The wind whispered through skeletal trees, rattling the boarded windows of abandoned homes, carrying with a faint scent of smoke from a distant, unseen fire. In the Reed barn, the German shepherd moved with careful precision within the cage, his muscles coiled like springs. Years of confinement had taught him subtlety, patience, and observation, skills now ready to be tested. Thomas paced, cigarette ash falling unnoticed onto the dust-strewn floor. The flicker of the dying light bulb above cast shadows that danced across the barn walls. He had been restless for days, a gnawing unease rooted in whispered rumors that something in town was amiss. Clara leaned against a support beam, her arms crossed, eyes sharp, scanning every corner. "You really think he can help?" Clara's voice was calm, but laced with skepticism. Her boot scraped the floor lightly as she shifted her weight. Thomas stopped pacing, exhaling a plume of smoke. "He's more than just a dog," he said, almost reverently. "He's different. He survived things no one should. And now we might need him to survive, too." The shepherd tilted his head, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He had learned to read human emotion like a book, to sense fear, doubt, and resolve. Now, he understood that something had changed. The air was thick with tension, charged with anticipation. Outside, the first signs of trouble crept through Cedar Hollow. A fire broke out in the northern woods, its smoke curling into the sky in ominous spirals. Flames licked hungrily at dry leaves and fallen branches, and the scent of burning pine reached the barn like a warning. Thomas's hand tightened on the cage bars. "It's starting," he muttered. "We don't have much time." The shepherd growled softly, low in his throat, a warning he had reserved for a moment of imminent danger. He had learned to distinguish between minor disturbances and true threats. This was a threat. Clara's eyes followed his gaze toward the east window, where the glow of fire painted the barn's walls in an eerie red. "What do we do?" she asked, unease creeping into her voice. Thomas's jaw tightened. "We prepare. He's the key, Clara. Trust him." The dog's tail thumped the floor once, deliberately, as if acknowledging the weight of Thomas's words. Then he began pacing, a tight, controlled movement, muscles coiled and ready. In the cage, he had learned patience, but now the time for waiting was over. As the night deepened, Cedar Hollow began to feel the first tremors of fear. Neighbors awoke to the distant roar of fire, the crackle of burning timber. Some called the fire department. Others grabbed what belongings they could. But in the chaos, the Reeds were focused on something else entirely, the hidden talent that had grown within the shepherd over years of confinement. It started subtly. The dog's ears twitched at sounds no human could hear. The snap of a branch, the faint movement of someone approaching, the irregular rhythm of footsteps on gravel. His senses were tuned to precision, and his mind worked like a finely calibrated instrument. Clara watched, fascinated despite herself, as he shifted closer to the cage door, muscles tense, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. He's almost human," she whispered. Thomas didn't respond. His attention was fixed on the patterns of light and shadow, the potential paths of escape, the dangers creeping closer. Years of moral compromise had hardened him, and now that edge was necessary. He had made decisions in the past, decisions that had broken trust, that had left scars on family and neighbors alike. But now, survival demanded more than remorse. It demanded action. The first intruder appeared just as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and fear. A man, masked and hesitant, approached the barn. The shepherd growled low and deliberate, then shifted, muscles coiled for a strike. Years of suppressed instincts, honed by confinement, now fueled his precision. Thomas caught the dog's gaze. "Now," he whispered. With a single fluid motion, the cage door swung open, not with force, but with the dog's trained skill. He slipped out like a shadow, silent and deliberate. The intruder froze, eyes wide, heart hammering. The German shepherd moved with uncanny intelligence, circling, herding, and anticipating. The man's weapon shook in his hand. He didn't realize it yet, but he had stepped into a predator's world. Clara gasped, gripping the beam for support. She had doubted the dog, doubted the Reed's methods, but watching him now, she felt a thrill of awe mixed with terror. The shepherd wasn't just defending. They were alive because of him. The intruder faltered, and the dog's amber eyes locked onto him with terrifying precision. A low growl vibrated through the barn. The man's foot slipped, and he stumbled backward, knocking over a crate. The noise echoed, sending dust motes spinning in the dim light. "Good boy," Thomas murmured, almost softly, as if praising a human soldier. But the dog didn't seek praise. He sought resolution. The intruder scrambled for the door, but the shepherd blocked the exit with instinctive strategy, not brute force alone. Every step he took, every move, had been honed over years in that cage, observing, surviving, calculating. The man finally bolted, disappearing into the night, leaving only the echo of his fear behind. Clara exhaled, trembling, and Thomas's shoulders sagged in relief. But the night wasn't over. The fire was spreading faster than expected, licking at the outskirts of Cedar Hollow, threatening homes and lives. And in the chaos, another danger emerged, a betrayal that neither Thomas nor Clara had anticipated. Someone knew about the shepherd, about his talent, about what the reeds had been hiding. A shadow detached itself from the tree line, moving with deliberate stealth toward the barn. The dog sensed it immediately, ears flattening, body tense. Thomas noticed too late. The figure was familiar. Damien? Thomas's voice cracked. The man who had once been his closest friend, now turned adversary, stepped from the darkness with a gun raised. I told you to stay away. Damien's eyes glittered in the firelight. I couldn't. Not when I heard what you've been hiding. That dog, he's more than you said. And now I want a piece of it. The shepherd growled, low and dangerous, moving between Thomas and the intruder. Years of observation had taught him strategy, and he was ready. Clara stepped forward, voice sharp. You don't know what you're dealing with, Damien. I know enough, Damien sneered, and I know how to take what I want. A tense silence hung, broken only by the distant roar of the fire and the shepherd's low, resonant growl. The dog's eyes flicked between the two men, calculating. His time in the cage had taught him more than obedience. It had taught him how to read human intent with surgical precision. Then, with a sudden, terrifying fluidity, the shepherd struck, not with mindless aggression, but with strategy. He feinted, lured Damien forward, then blocked the exit, forcing him into a corner. The struggle was brief but decisive. Damien's gun clattered across the floor, out of reach. The intruder scrambled backward, fear overtaking his confidence. Get out, Thomas barked, voice sharp. Now. Damien didn't hesitate this time. He ran, disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind the echo of betrayal and the memory of what he had underestimated. The shepherd returned to Thomas's side, panting lightly, eyes glowing with triumph and awareness. Clara approached cautiously, reaching down to touch his head. He tolerated it, not with affection, but acknowledgement. He had served his purpose, and his loyalty was now proven beyond doubt. Outside, the fire roared, consuming trees and brush with relentless hunger. But within the barn, a fragile peace settled. The shepherd had awakened, his hidden talent revealed, and Cedar Hollow had glimpsed a power it could neither control nor ignore. Thomas lit another cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. He's ready, he said softly. Whatever comes next, he's ready. Clara nodded, still catching her breath. We've underestimated him. We've underestimated ourselves. And as the night deepened, the German shepherd sat between them, alert, intelligent, a silent sentinel forged by years of confinement and neglect. He was more than a dog. He was a weapon, a guardian, a force of nature honed in a cage for years. And now, Cedar Hollow would never be the same. Dawn crept over Cedar Hollow like a pale warning, brushing the treetops with sickly gold. Smoke still lingered from the night's fire, curling through the town streets, acrid and sharp. Houses stood scarred but not destroyed. A few roofs smoldered, and the distant wail of sirens hinted that the chaos had only just begun. In the reed barn, the German shepherd paced, muscles taut and coiled. His eyes, amber and bright, scanned the surroundings like a hawk searching for prey. Years of confinement had sharpened not just his senses, but his mind. He had been trained by necessity, forced to observe, to calculate, to anticipate. And now, with the world spilling danger at their door, that hidden talent would be the difference between life and death. Thomas stood at the far wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. He had survived deceit, isolation, and moral compromise, but the night had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Clara leaned beside him, eyes scanning the entrance, still haunted by Damien's betrayal. Her moral certainties had been shattered. Now survival was raw, immediate, and unforgiving. We have to move, Thomas said finally, voice steady. He's not just defending. He's leading. Clara's gaze flicked to the shepherd. For years she had doubted him, doubted what could emerge from such confinement. Now she saw the truth. He was more than a dog. He was strategy incarnate. A force honed in silence and patience, ready to confront the world. The first sign of the new threat arrived almost silently. From the trees came a rustling, subtle yet deliberate. Figures emerged, dark silhouettes against the golden haze of dawn. Local mercenaries hired by Damien, seeking what they thought they could control. They carried tools, weapons, and a certainty born of greed. The shepherd growled, low and resonant, alerting Thomas and Clara. But he didn't charge. He moved with precision, positioning himself to intercept, to herd, to control, not merely attack. Years in a cage had taught him the subtle art of influence, the power of prediction, the leverage of fear. Thomas grabbed Clara's hand. "Stay close," he whispered. "Follow his lead." The first mercenary stepped forward, weapon raised, eyes scanning for targets. The shepherd lunged, not blindly, but with a calculated feint, forcing the man to misstep. A second mercenary approached from the left, only to find himself blocked by the dog's strategic positioning. Each movement was precise, choreographed, instinctual. This was no longer survival. It was mastery. Clara's heart pounded. He's incredible," she murmured, almost to herself. Thomas didn't respond. His eyes never left the scene unfolding before him. Every step, every decision had to be measured. Years of hiding the shepherd had been preparation. Now the town's fate, their fate, rested on the culmination of neglect, patience, and training. A sudden crash. One of the mercenaries had tripped over an old crate, alerting the others. Chaos erupted. Guns fired, shattering windows and echoing across the empty streets. The shepherd moved with uncanny awareness, intercepting, deflecting, and disarming. A bullet grazed the wall, the smell of gunpowder sharp in a confined space. Then came Damien. He emerged from the shadows, a figure of rage and obsession. "Step aside," he shouted. "He's mine." Thomas stepped forward, unafraid. "You've already lost, Damien. You never understood him, or us." The shepherd's gaze fixed on Damien, reading him, calculating the threat with unerring precision. Years in the cage had honed instincts into a weapon of survival and judgment. He lunged, blocking Damien's path, teeth bared, eyes glowing with calculated intent. Damien stumbled, unprepared for the precision and intelligence behind the animal's movement. Clara grabbed a fallen pipe, ready to intervene if necessary, but she quickly realized she didn't need to. The shepherd had become both guardian and strategist, anticipating every move, countering every threat. Damien's greed and arrogance were no match for years of patience and training distilled into one living instrument of survival. The mercenaries faltered, panic breaking their discipline. Some fled to the barn's back exit. Others froze, unsure how to proceed against a force that moved with intelligence rather than mindless aggression. The shepherd herded them like water, directing fear and movement, until the barn was emptied. Only Damien remained, trapped in his hubris. "You don't get it," Damien snarled, sweat beading on his forehead. "This was supposed to be mine." "No," Thomas said quietly, approaching him. "This was never yours." The shepherd growled, a sound filled with authority. Damien faltered, seeing the depth of control in those amber eyes. For the first time, fear overtook arrogance. He realized it would have been honed in darkness. The dog's intelligence, precision, and instinct was something no human could dominate. The standoff ended almost imperceptibly. Damien dropped to his knees, defeated not by force alone, but by calculated mastery. The shepherd remained alert, unwavering, a sentinel molded by years of hardship. Hours later, the barn lay quiet. Cedar Hollow had been spared further destruction. Flames had been contained, fires extinguished by quick-thinking neighbors and timely intervention, aided indirectly by the shepherd's precision in herding intruders away from danger. Thomas knelt beside the German shepherd, resting his hands on the dog's head. "You saved more than just us tonight," he said softly, voice heavy with gratitude and awe. "You saved the town." Clara approached, her expression softened by the shared ordeal. "We underestimated you, all of us did," she admitted. Her hand brushed along his back. The shepherd allowed it, acknowledgement rather than affection. He had earned trust, not comfort. For the first time in years, the cage was no longer necessary. The barn's confines had forged him, but now the world demanded his freedom. Yet even in freedom, he remained vigilant, a guardian shaped by neglect and sharpened by circumstance. The town slowly recovered, but whispers lingered. Stories of the German shepherd, the reeds, and the strange night of fire circulated in hushed tones. Most dismissed them as exaggeration, but a few, the ones who had glimpsed the dog's calculated intelligence and quiet heroism, knew the truth. Later, As the sun dipped behind the hills, Thomas and Clara stood at the edge of the barn, the shepherd between them, looking toward the horizon. The wind carried the scent of pine, smoke, and something indefinable, a promise of vigilance, resilience, and quiet justice. Thomas sighed. "We've been given a second chance," he said, voice low. "And thanks to him, we're ready for whatever comes next." The German shepherd barked softly, a sound of acknowledgement. He had endured years of isolation, years of neglect, but he had transformed that suffering into purpose. And now, for the first time, he knew what freedom meant. Not indulgence, but responsibility. Clara watched him, understanding finally what Thomas had always known. "He's not just a dog," she said quietly. "He's everything we needed." The barn, once a place of darkness and punishment, had become a crucible that forged a hero. The shepherd had been the unlikely force that reminded them of courage, intelligence, and loyalty in its purest, most unyielding form. As night fell over Cedar Hollow, the three of them, 2 humans and 1 extraordinary dog, stood together in quiet triumph. No words were necessary. Their bond, tested by fire, betrayal, and danger, was unspoken but unbreakable. And somewhere in the stillness, the town slept, unaware that the greatest story it would never fully know had just unfolded, shaped not by force alone, but by the extraordinary talent of a dog who had survived the impossible. The shepherd lay down, head resting between his paws, amber eyes alert even in repose. Years of confinement had made him formidable. Years of freedom would make him wise. He had endured, he had judged, and in the end he had saved them all. A subtle wind rustled through the trees, carrying the promise of tomorrow, tempered by lessons of the past. And Cedar Hollow, forever changed, would never forget the quiet power that had emerged from the cage.